Hey, Matt Scratch here. So today I am tackling the electrical problem on my 2004 PT Cruiser. If you watch my previous video when I bought the car, there is some bad wiring down in this area. The engine harness runs along the front of the engine there, and it's got a big ugly splice in it. So I'm going to be removing this entire intake, both the upper and the lower part. And that'll gain me some access to see what's going on there. Just get all that tape off there, and I'm guessing I'm going to have to solder up a bunch of connections, so I'll show you how I do that. I'll show you what I find and how I fix it, basically. I'm also going to be doing a video on changing the spark plugs, since you have to take the upper intake off to do it. So if you're interested in that, I'll put the link in the description. I'm just going to be using a little bit of brake clean to clean up the top of the engine here. So make sure you wear gloves when you do this, because this is a solvent, so best not to get it on your hands, even though I am. Now that I have the upper intake off, I'm going to remove this radiator hose completely out of here. That will give me lots of access to get the lower intake off, and I'll need that room anyways to access the wiring down there. So normally I would drain the radiator completely out probably, and even change the thermostat, because you know, I'm already in here. But I'm actually going to be doing a video coming up on changing the timing belt and water pump on this, and I'll be doing the thermostat as part of that. So for now I'm just going to drain off what I need to take this hose out, and I'll top it up after I'm done. So just an 8mm clamp. The original clamp would have been a spring clamp, which I actually prefer because they hold more evenly than this style. But so I do have a drain pan under there to catch the. I'm just gonna go like that. Sounds like it's actually going in the drain pan, which is nice. I'm having a little trouble getting to this spring clamp under here. It's not really made to be taken off. You're supposed to take the thermostat housing off to access it, so looks like I could just barely get on it here. Then I'm trying to turn it as soon as I get it loose. Close. There we go. Got her. She's on there. It actually looks like somebody has recently resealed that thermostat housing with some RTV. I can see a little RTV there, so I wonder what happened there. Well, it's really pouring with rain out, so I hope that's not coming through too loud on the video here, but I just have to disconnect the fuel line now from the fuel rail. And it's just got a little clip on it. It's like a U-shaped clip, and you need like a little screwdriver to get behind it and pull it out. So I'm just gonna do that, and then I'll show you when I get it out what I mean. It's a little bit stubborn. You just want to be careful not to like slip and break something, because all this stuff's fragile and possibly expensive to replace. There, victory. So that was a little stubborn getting out of there. You can see there's a lot of mud and stuff on it, so that's why. It's old and dirty and all gummed up. And then that just pulls straight off of there. So outside, and you can see those tabs sticking through there. That's what holds it in. So that's what I was actually doing with the little screwdriver there, is I was pushing those tabs through, and then I was hooking under here and pulling it out, and then ultimately I used the needle nose to fish it out because they kind of catch as it's coming out. So now with the fuel line off, it's just a matter of unplugging the 4 injectors. So they have these typical Chrysler red safety clips on them. You just pull those up, depress the tab, and then you can kind of support the injector. And everything on this car is kind of grimy, so I'm finding electrical connectors don't come apart that easy. But it should pull straight up. There we go. Okay. Well, that one's too tight to get out right now, but there, that is all free. So now it looks like just 10mm bolts is to roll them there. Before you go removing the lower intake here, just make sure you remove this 10mm fastener here that's holding the dipstick tube. So a ratcheting wrench is your best friend here if you have one. Okay, so now we can tackle those row of 10mm holding the actual intake on. So I'm actually finding I'm having to remove the thermostat housing bolt, just the rear bolt, so that I can get that bolt out. Then it looks like the manifold will come off. Maybe not, I might have to remove this thermostat housing. It's been a while since I had one of these manifolds off, and I think I had the thermostat housing off that time. So I'm not too sure. I was just trying to avoid draining the coolant down to that level. I can get on there now at least. It's going to be the moment of truth here. I just got this bolt in here finger tight, and then the other end is completely out. So I'm just going to see if I can angle that bolt so the washer clears the thermostat housing. Yep, perfect. So you do not have to remove the thermostat housing. It'd be easier if you did, but I didn't want to lose the coolant. That was my reasoning there. So there you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts is all. They're all pretty easy to get to with a little 1/4 inch ratchet and extension. And these are reusable gaskets. It would be a good idea to replace them. I'm not going to be, so I'll be cleaning all this up though before I put it back together. Now I've got lots of room to work here, and you can finally get a look at what I was seeing down there. So there's the mess of wires I gotta fix, but you can see there's another area of electrical tape and stuff over there. It really looks like quite a mess. There's little, like there's a connector just hanging out there and stuff, and a bare wire end hanging out there, so I have no idea what's going on. I gotta get all that sorted out. I'm gonna have to take the airbox and battery out as well. I'm not gonna show you that because I've shown it in a few other videos. So I'll get back with you when that's removed. I've got things all apart here, and I did notice one little issue. There should be a temperature sensor in that hole. I do have one luckily, but this one seems to be missing. I can see this is the plug that it should hook to, and it's just a little round sensor that goes in the bottom of the battery tray there. I'm not sure how vital it is, but since I have one, I'll definitely put one back in. So now my next order of business will be to cut all these zip ties and unravel all this wiring and see exactly what's going on here. I just want to show what it looks like stock. This is on my mom's 06 and it should be exactly the same as the 04 on the starter wiring at least. So I'm not sure what they've got going on exactly. They have that additional wire running back into the harness here and it runs back behind the engine. So I'm going to have to trace that and see where it goes. That's a totally added wire. And then there's a few splices in this area I'm going to have to look into. Well, I pretty well got it figured out. This wire here is actually to replace this wire, which is going to the alternator, and I'm not sure why they had to replace it, but it looks like they actually did a pretty good job of replacing it despite their sloppy tape job. I'm not nearly as impressed with their ability to splice wires, so I'm going to be repairing these two terrible connections here. You can see that one, they've put two wires in one end of a butt connector and crimped it using the butt connector like it was a Mars connector. So that's actually the first time I've ever seen that. I'm just removing the starter here, and the reason for that is there's an electrical plug below it I can't access with it there, and I actually have a low mile starter for this car that I'm going to put on in place of this one. I can see somebody's been beating on this one and everything, and I was thinking about just cleaning up the terminals and calling it good because it has been working fine since I got the car. But I think just to be safe and eliminate it, I'm going to put the other one on. I'm also going to be cleaning up the all the grounds and everything like that, battery cables, everything like that, just to eliminate any chance of that. So there, the starters are pretty easy to get off on these. If you didn't have the intake out of the way, you'd just have to get at that bottom bolt from the underside. Here's where I'm at. So this was that plug that I was having a heck of a time getting undone below the starter, and you can see it had one of those red clips in it and I just couldn't feel it up there. All I could feel is this. And I felt here and there was no clip here, but the clip goes in from the side on this one, so that kind of foiled me with all the grease there. I couldn't tell what was going on. Anyways, I'm not sure if that's like a speed sensor or a I'm kind of thinking that's a speed sensor, but it could also be an oil sensor or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but whatever it is actually what the wiring was damaged leading to it. And so maybe that was why they were having a random problem where the car would either not start or it would die immediately after starting. But these are holding together, although they're pretty sketchy looking. I'm going to be cutting them apart. I've bared the wires back. This had tape and casing over it all, and so I didn't have enough access to make a nice repair, so I've got it all pulled back. They're all greasy, so I'm going to be taking some brake clean and wiping it all clean, and then I'll cut these butt connectors out, and we'll get a proper splice going there and solder it together. Put some sealed heat shrink tubing on over it and tape it all back up, and it should be good as new. Then we'll put the new starter in, clean up all the terminals. See, there's a ground terminal there. There's the power terminal there. I'll be cleaning that kind of thing up. And then we'll get everything degreased and thrown back together, and should be good to go. So here's what I'll be using to make this repair. There, just so you can read what's on there, but that is electrical solder. I actually got it off of Amazon. Came all the way from China, but it's a good quality silver solder with a rosin core in it for soldering on electrical, because the regular flux core and like solder that you would use for plumbing is different. It has an acid in it that will cause corrosion in your connection afterwards, so don't use that. Also, this heat shrink tubing, says weather resistant on it. It has a sealant in it that's going to melt out and seal up the ends. And then I just have a 40 watt soldering iron here. Tip's pretty worn out. I actually have a brand new one of these, but this one's still working, so we're going to use it. You'll notice I've zip tied up the harnesses so it's easy access. And we'll cut that one out too. Now you want to remember to put your heat shrink on there before you join the wire, because you can't get it on after. So slide it as far away from the connection as you can, because it's going to get hot when you solder it. This is probably standard 16 gauge, so, and you want to strip it pretty long when you're soldering, at least I do. Make sure that you're not pulling any wires with it. I've zoomed in here, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is just take my fingertip and lightly brush the ends of the wires and kind of fray them all out like that. Not many strands to this tiny little wire, but you get the idea. And then what you do is you slide that together like that. You give it just a good twist. That'll just wrap those loose ends around, actually. So what you want to do is get under there and start heating it, and then you add a little bit of solder there. It's called tinning it, just at the base, and then you can just feed it into the joint from that point on. Unfortunately, that came apart a little bit, so I don't know if you can see that, but it's not ruined or anything. I just have to bend that stray end in, and I'll give it another go here. Oh! Yeah, don't put tools on your car. So there we go, that's actually a nice strong connection there. And we'll prep the other one here and do it as well. I'll give you a close-up in a minute here when I get them both done. Now this one's got some pressure against it. Doesn't really want to go where I want it to be. That is the problem, just getting the joint set up and relaxed enough that it's not going to move around on you while you're soldering it. Because they really don't hold much when you just twist them together until the solder's in the joint. I like to completely fill the joint up there. There we go, that one turned out a little nicer than the last one. There, you can see that up close. Pretty neat connections. And I always give them a good pull test. They're nice and strong. I'm just going to go ahead and shrink this heat shrink tubing now. So make sure you get your joint centered in there so it has a bit of heat shrink on each side of it. And then don't burn up any other wires in the process. So there's the finished repair. You can see how that sealant is oozing out the end there. And I just made sure all the ends were sealed like that. And now I'm going to go ahead and tape this all back up. And one thing I just want to point out is there is a difference between, this is like 99-cent electrical tape and this is like $4 electrical tape. And the difference is the material it's made out of. So this is just a vinyl tape, and then this is a rubber tape, and it's a lot more sticky and stretchy, see, good flexibility. It works a lot better for doing electrical work, and you get a lot better seal with it than with this cheap stuff. The cheap stuff's kind of thicker and it doesn't flex as good, so it ends up getting air gaps where it doesn't seal up. So spend the extra money, get the good stuff. I've got everything taped up now. You can see I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I mean, it doesn't quite look factory because it's still a big gob of tape, but we know what's under the tape is good and solid, and it's going to make a good connection. You can see there's some butt connectors that the other guys dropped down there when they were working. Problem is they were trying to fix this without taking anything off to get access, and there was like little bits of tape in there like that long, literally. They were just piecemealing that together, and that's why it looks so rough. They really didn't have room to work, so that's why I had to take all of it apart to do it properly. But now I know it's not going to be an issue, and I'm not going to end up broke down on the side of the road because of some sketchy connection. So here's where we're at now. I've didn't video quite a bit. I didn't think you guys needed to see me scrubbing that all clean, but I've got that all cleaned up now, and the only thing left is the gasket surfaces. Now when I took my plugs out, I had my vacuum ready, and I vacuumed in and all around all these ports so that any grit that might have fallen in while I was grabbing those plugs out of there, those towels, it got vacuumed back out already, and I'm going to hit it once more before I put it together. And I just want to show you the how I scrape these gasket surfaces up here. So make sure you use a plastic scraper so that you don't scar up the aluminum. And it does take longer, but it's worth it because you know you're going to get a good seal. Not much point in even cleaning it if you're going to scrape it all up and ruin the sealing surface. So now I'm just going to take some brake clean and spray on this. Just made that really wet with brake clean, and then I'm just going to wipe over to make sure that any contaminants is off that surface, and that'll also get rid of some of the residual that didn't come off with the scraping. It's more important that the surface be smooth and not have any defects in it really than that it actually look good. Sometimes you still have a bit of staining on it or something, but if it feels perfectly smooth and nothing's catching your fingernail or anything, don't go digging at it, just leave it. So you can see how much I got off of that gasket surface still just by wiping it with the solvent there, so it's well worth doing. There's the finished result after cleaning up the gasket surfaces. So it's all ready to go back together now. I just gotta start by putting the starter back on, and then I can proceed with the intake. To give my used starter the best chance at a long life here, I've gone ahead and cleaned up the electrical connections. I just used a Scotch-Brite pad and a wire brush to clean all those up and put some dielectric grease on it. I even undid the nut on that terminal and cleaned under it and everything, and then I put a little bit of grease on the Bendix here just to keep everything working smoothly for a while to come. This starter's only got 140,000 kilometers on it, so it should be good for a while yet. I just wanted to show a final look at the wiring before I put the intake back on. And I've got dielectric grease on all the connections and everything. So I'm just going to put the intake on now and get back with you after that. Anyways, I've got all those connectors back on, dielectric grease on them all, made sure all the locks are done up. One thing, this master plug here, that big plug you can just see down there, that gray one, it has a little tab on it that attaches to the second bolt in there, goes under the head of it, so make sure you get that. And there's another clip that clips on to the bracket on the power steering pump over there for the harness that goes to the AC. And so if you got all that, your wiring will all be routed out of the way and it won't be rubbing on anything. So now I got to put that pesky hose back in, and I got to make sure the spring clamps down because I'm pretty sure the ends of it don't clear on the intake here. So I'm just putting the fuel line back on, and you do actually need to have the retaining clip slid out to do that. I thought that you could just press it on, but you actually can't. Sorry, I had to put the camera down there, but you have to push it down really firmly. Make sure you have it all the way down, then push your clip in and then pull back on it and make sure that it's on there firmly. And then when you pressure it up, make sure you check it for leaks, but also you're going to have to cycle your key on and off a bunch of times to get the system to fill back up with fuel. And there is actually a purge valve here in case you get air in it. It's like a tire valve. You take that little plastic cap off and you can just depress it with a little screwdriver or something and bleed some fuel out of there, and that'll purge the air out. So I've got that tight. You will need to like lift on the intake a little bit just to get the hole lined up, and then it's a 13mm ratcheting wrench. Works perfectly for that. Just make sure you don't over torque it. It's just going into plastic. So now these you're supposed to torque from the center out generally on a manifold of any kind, a flange of any kind. So we're going to follow that procedure, and we're just going to go around and do a little on each one at a time. That way it goes down really evenly. So just a good firm twist is all I'm going to ultimately give. I'll just go back and check them all. Okay, so that is good. I've got everything buttoned up again here and ready to do the initial start. So this is the first start since all my repairs. I checked the oil and topped up the coolant, and all that stuff's good. So here we go. We're going to give her a shot. There we go, guys. That sounds pretty healthy, so I'd call that a success. Thanks for watching Matt's Garage. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.